If you've ever run into issues or frustrations while trying to record in Luna with your Apollo interface, then you're in the right place. In this video, we're going to cover how to set things up. We're going to talk about which plugins to use where and why. We're going to clear up some common misconceptions, and I'm going to show you how to avoid the common issues that tend to trip people up and that I get questions about all the time. So whether you've just started recording with Luna and your Apollo interface, or you've been using them for a while but just keep running into roadblocks and questions, this video is going to help you finally understand exactly what's going on so you can stop troubleshooting and just start recording. All right, so let's do a quick rundown of the hardware we're going to be using. We're going to be using the Shure SM7B microphone today. Normally, I would be tracking vocals back there, but we're going to have it set up here for convenience sake of the video. Also worth noting, right now, you're actually hearing my camera microphone. We will switch over to this. I'll let you know when that happens. And then we're coming out XLR at the back of the microphone, and then we are going to be plugging straight into input 1 of my interface right there. One thing worth noting is if you have a guitar cable plugged in right here, that will bypass input 1 at that microphone level and you won't hear anything. So make sure your guitar cable's unplugged, or just go ahead and plug into input 2 back there. Either way works, but we're using 1 for today and we're not worried about any of this stuff down here. On the monitor side of things right here, my speakers are currently muted. That's why it's red right there. If I unmute it, that turns green. Back to red is muted. And I have those muted because I'm right here in front of the speakers. This is a one-room recording studio situation, right? I don't want the guitars and the drums and all the other instruments of the song coming out of the speakers and getting into my microphone. So I have the speakers muted. And we'll be running through my headphones for listening. So switch over here. You can see my headphones. That's a decent volume for starting with my headphones right there. Of course, my headphones are plugged in right here, and we're using the Audio Technicas right there. And of course, then my interface is plugged into my MacBook Pro via Thunderbolt. And you can see we have Luna pulled up here with a current session. We've got drums going on, we've got guitars and all that stuff going on, and essentially we're ready to start tracking vocals. However, before we start adding vocal tracks to our session, there are a couple really important things we need to double check in order to make sure everything goes smoothly. So the first thing we need to check is to make sure this audio device setting right here is set to Apollo, because we're using our Apollo interface and we want to take advantage of all those features that we paid extra money for, right? So make sure this is set to Apollo. Now you can see this other option right here is Core Audio, and if you're on Windows, it'll say ASIO right there, and that allows you to use other interfaces like Universal Audio's Volt interfaces or a Focusrite Scarlett or one of the PreSonus interfaces. That's what allows for that, but again, we're using Apollo, so we're going to stick to the Apollo setting. And the other setting we want to double check is up here, is this arm right here. That's not showing for you. You can find it right here under Record Workflow. Make sure that is enabled. You can also find that over here in the mix window, this button right here, just make sure that is lit up orange. And what ARM does is allows for that accelerated real-time monitoring. That's that near zero latency thing they talk about when you're using plugins and they're running on your actual Apollo interface. So when we're trying to run those plugins while we're recording, we want to make sure ARM is enabled. A couple other things up here real quick. Click to cue and cue outputs are also part of all this. We won't be using those today. I don't use those when I'm recording my own vocals. Also right over here, you can see we have our available ARM channels. Just let you know how much you have left as far as channels opening up between your Apollo interface and Luna. I never run out because I don't use it that heavily, but you can see I have 10 mono channels or 5 stereo channels, and as we start to add channels, you'll see those numbers drop. If you have a quad or a bigger interface, then you're probably going to have higher numbers right there. Again, I'm just running a duo, so that's what I have, which is more than enough for me. And while we're here talking about these settings, there is one question that comes up that confuses people sometimes, and that is, what about console? So if you have an Apollo interface and you've used it with Logic or Pro Tools or Studio One, something like that, then you're going to be familiar with console. And if you're new to the Apollo ecosystem and only using Luna, you may not know what console is. And essentially, console is a software application. It looks a little bit like Luna, where it allows you to control your audio interface. You can run the plugins on your Apollo interface through console and all those kinds of things. And then from there, the audio goes to your recording software, Logic, Pro Tools, Studio One, like that, right? So essentially, console is a software application in between your audio interface and your recording software. Now with Luna, we do not use console for a whole lot of reasons. First of all, Luna is kind of like console, but with recording and editing capabilities. Plus, Luna is actually even more tightly integrated with your Apollo interface than console is. And that's because this is Universal Audio's recording software. They have full access, so they can do things in here they can't do in Pro Tools or Logic because essentially they're locked out. It's not their software. So we don't need to use console, and we can kind of hang out in Luna, and we've actually got some extra benefits by using Luna with our Apollo interface. All right, so back here on the timeline view, let's go ahead and add our vocal track. So we're going to click right here to add a track after this guitar track. I'm going to choose plus, audio. There are shortcuts for this, but we're just going to do it this way for now. Choose Vox. We're going to leave the tape on right now. Not worried about console stuff right now. Choose create. And now you can see we have our vocal track right here. I like to make mine purple because I think of it as violet, V for vocals, V for violet. Kind of just makes sense in my brain. All right, so now we have our focus channel right here for our vocal track, and we're going to hang out right here. Couple things we want to check now that we have this added. We want to check our input right here. Make sure that that's the correct input. We are in mic line high Z1, as I said before, but if you're plugged into 2, then you just want to select this one right here. But again, we're in 1, so we're good to go right there. Another thing you're going to notice is that all these buttons are empty. There's no values or anything here. You can't do anything with those. So to make these active, we just need to come down here and either hit input monitor or record. We're going to choose input monitor for now. We'll talk about why a little bit later on, but you can see as soon as I do that, all this stuff lights up. All right, so now that these buttons are active right here, we can actually use these to control our audio interface because again, we're in Apollo mode down here, and that allows Luna to talk to our Apollo interface. So if I click the input button right here, you can see that it changed to line input on the software as well as on the interface. And if I click it, it goes back. Right here, this is my gain knob. So as I turn it up in the software, it also goes up on my audio interface. I can set phantom power, I can turn the pad on, I can flip the polarity, I can do high pass filter, all those things start to light up and are reflected on the interface itself. And of course I can turn them off as well. And likewise, if I start turning the gain knob up on my audio interface, then you can see that happening on the software as well, and any of these buttons will also change on the software as well. So again, a nice integration between Luna and your Apollo interface. All right, so I've brought my microphone back in because we're about to get into the good stuff. And we're going to start talking about plugins and how we actually record our vocals. There are actually 3 places where we can insert plugins on our channel, and they actually do different things. They work in different ways, so it's really important to understand the differences so we can make sure that we're getting the results we want and that we expect. All right, so you can see I've switched over to the mix window, just a different view to show that we can see everything here as well. And I went ahead and pulled my vocal track all the way to the left just because we're gonna be working in this area quite a bit. Now, as far as those 3 places where we can insert plugins, we have one right here, the Unison slot right there. We have the record effects right here. And then we have a section here called inserts. And you can see we have this yellow line around right here and 4 spaces right there. All right, so let's first talk about this Unison slot. It's the first place in our signal flow. And so what's so special about the Unison slot? Well, there's a lot special about this. First of all, if we click this add button right here, we can see plugins come up, and we only get a select few plugins. You'll notice that we have a bass amp sim, we have guitar amp sims in here, but other than that, we only have like microphone preamps or channel strips. You won't find any reverbs or compressors or EQs in here. Now, some of those preamps and channel strips will have EQs built into them or compressors built into them, but you're not going to find like an 1176 or an LA2A compressor or a plate reverb or anything like that. So chances are, if you look through here, you're going to see some familiar ones you have, probably the UA610. You probably have the Helios right there, and you should have the the Century tube channel strip right there as well, because those typically come with the bundles that we get with our audio interface. I have some extra ones here that I've purchased additionally to that. And you'll see one right here, the Neve 1084. I really like this one, and we're actually going to use this one for today. So I just click on that, and you can see it got loaded right here into my Unison preamp slot. All right, so now I have my Neve preamp pulled up here, and this will give us a great way to demonstrate the other special features of the Unison preamp. So first of all, what we can't hear right now is that when you pull up a preamp like this, it actually changes the impedance level on the input of your interface. There's a physical change there. So the idea is whatever the 1084 preamp impedance would be, your Apollo is going to be that. That way your microphone sees the input of your Apollo as it would an actual Neve preamp. If you use the UA610 preamp, that's probably going to have a different impedance, and your microphone would react differently to that. And so you're going to have all these different impedances depending on what preamp you're using. And again, that's a physical change at the hardware level of your input on your Apollo interface. None of the other plugin slots do that, just the Unison slot. Now, if you remembered, we could control our interface using these buttons over here, and we can actually do the same thing with our Unison plugin, in this case, the preamp. So if I start turning up the gain knob right here, you can see that it's also reflected on my audio interface. You'll see the lights are orange this time. That's just to indicate that we're using a Unison plugin and is controlling it from there. And again, I can add a pad right here, turn it back off. I can flip the polarity from here, or I can add a high pass filter and you can see it come on right there, and I can turn it back off. So another great example of Luna being tightly integrated with our Apollo interface. And the Unison slot is the only place where we can add plugins that actually interact with our interface in this way. All right, another feature of the Unison slot is we have this auto gain option. This is available with the Gen 2 interfaces and with the Neve preamps and the API preamps. I'll leave a full list of which preamps are available for this, and hopefully they add some later on, but we do have these currently. So what we do is click on auto gain right here, and you can see we have some different settings for how long we want it to listen for, adjust while listening, minimum threshold before it starts listening, and there's our target peak. So if I hit start right here, listening right here, and it'll start adjusting my preamp gain automatically, and it kind of just try to set right there. Now it's going to set a little bit higher than I normally like because I'm just talking. If I were singing, I'd be singing louder. I usually hit around 60, but you can see that's where it decided that it wants to set that gain knob for me. And of course, I can always adjust it afterwards, and then I can bring these up like so. This way you can hear me better. So just increasing my output right there. And also from here, I will add some EQ, maybe like a little bit of high end right there, maybe do a little roll off right there, and kind of just get things sitting pretty good, just like so. Now, one final thing to note about the Unison plugin slot is that anything that we record through this slot, through this plugin, will be baked into our audio. So these EQ settings we're using, the gain knob and the saturation we're adding, that will actually get recorded into our audio and cannot be undone. So think of it as if you're plugging a microphone into a real Neve console or a real Neve channel strip, that's the sound you're getting. So when I add EQ and stuff like this, I usually dial in kind of just to get it a little bit closer to what I want tone-wise, but I'm also a little bit conservative because at the same time that it's great to have this, it is baked in and kind of final. So that is our Unison slot right there. So we'll go ahead and close this out. Lots of great options there, and it's kind of one of the hallmark features of our Apollo Twin, right? And then we'll scroll on down here to the record effects. That's the next slot in our signal chain. And we'll click the plus sign here to add. And when we do that, you'll see we still have our bass amp sim, we still have our channel strips and stuff like that, but you're also going to see reverbs in here. You're going to see delays in here. You're going to see EQs and all kinds of stuff like that. Pretty much every UAD2 plugin that you own will show up here. Okay, so we'll go ahead and drop a compressor, and let's do like an 1176 right here. We'll do the blue stripe right here. There you go. And you can hear it kick in, and it's already compressing. And while the record effects slot here can't control our audio interface or anything like that, it is similar to the Unison slot in that anything that's on here when you record, it will get baked into your recording and cannot be undone. So if I have compression on here like this, then that compression will be part of my recording. Or if I put EQ, or if I drop a reverb on here, that will be part of my recording. So with that in mind, I actually never use the record effects plugin slot. I actually use the next type of plugin slot we're going to talk about, and I'll tell you exactly why here in just a second. So let's get rid of our compressor right here. And you can just drag it off into a blank area like this. And now you can see it's gone. Hey there, just wanted to jump in real quick and first of all say thank you so much for watching. And also, if the recordings of your songs don't sound as pro as you would like them to, make sure you drop down the description, grab my free guide, Why Your Recordings Still Don't Sound Pro. And there you're going to find 7 simple fixes you can start using on your very next recording to make it sound much more professional. And the good news is you don't need to buy anything. You don't need to buy any new microphones, outboard gear, or even plugins. These are things that the pros use day in and day out to make sure that their recordings sound professional, and you can start using them as well. So make sure you grab that guide, give those things a try, and let me know how it goes. All right, back to the video. And so now it's time to talk about our insert slot right here. You can see this yellow line is around it, or orange, whichever way you want to call it. And we have 4 slots right here. So if we click on this plus right here, you'll see we have our plugin browser window open up again. And now we actually have even more plugins available to us. So not only do we have our universal audio plugins, we actually have our universal audio native plugins. We have third-party plugins available to us, all kinds of things. And this can actually cause a little bit of confusion. So let's start off with our universal audio plugins first of all. Stick with what we know, right? So let's go ahead and we're going to add a compressor again, but this time we're going to use the LA2A. Like this. And then I'm going to just use this silver one right here. There we go. All right, so now we have our compression going on. I just did some quick dialing in of some settings, and we can obviously hear it's being compressed. Now, just like the Unison slot and just like the record effects slot, I can hear this compression. You should be able to hear the compression as well. And we have ARM turned on, so we have that advantage of the accelerated real-time monitoring, that near zero latency, all those kinds of things, right? Now, the advantage of the insert slots here that the other ones don't have is that this sound I'm hearing, this compression, will not be baked into my recording. I can hear it while I'm recording. I can, have reverbs. I could have compression. I can have EQ, all the things I want here, but it will not be actually part of my recording. In fact, when I get done recording, I can hit play and it'll play and I'll still hear the compression because it's running through the compressor after the recording, just as if you were mixing and stuff like that. But it won't be baked in. So we can change our settings. Maybe I want a ton of compression while I'm recording, but when it comes to mix time or just later on, I want to dial back that compression, or maybe I want a certain kind of reverb while I'm recording and tracking my vocals, but really later on, I want a different kind of reverb. This allows for that. Again, I can hear this stuff while I'm recording, but it will not be baked into my audio. If I decide I do really like it and I do want it to be baked into my audio, I can always bounce this track down with these settings and then it will bake it into my audio. So you can actually get the same end result as the record effects plugin slot where everything is baked in, but you have more flexibility and options to tweak things while or after recording. And once you're satisfied with the result, then you can bounce it down and bake that sound in if you want to, but you don't have to. Now, like I said, the insert slots, there's a lot of flexibility and options available to us, and we kind of just touched on just a little bit of it. And sometimes with all this flexibility and these options, it kind of confuses people, trips people up. Sometimes it even gets me. I'm just working really quickly trying to get stuff done, and I'm like, well, why isn't this working, right? And so if you run into issues, we're going to address some of those things right now, and this is probably one of the things you're running into. All right, so again, you'll notice we have this orange line going on right around here, and that's indicating that this is in ARM mode. It's the same color as our ARM button right here, and we have 4 slots right here where we can add an insert plugin. Again, we can add reverbs, EQs, compressors, whatever we want, right? Now, when we turn this off, you'll see we have an additional one right here. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, and a 5th insert point right here. And if I click that one right here, let's choose something really obvious. So let's go with pure plate reverb. All right, so you can hear that there's definitely reverb going on right now. And because we're not in arm mode, we don't have that yellow line there. But again, this is in that 5th plugin spot. So if I hit arm mode right now, we'll switch over to arm mode, and now you can tell that there's no reverb. And that's because, again, we can only put 4 plugins in here, and that will run in arm mode while we're tracking. So if you have something in the 5th slot right here, it'll be disabled when you switch to arm mode. All right, so let's turn arm mode back off. You can hear my reverb again. So if we recorded without the reverb, and then when we hit play and we're out of arm mode, you'll hear the reverb on playback. So that's kind of something to keep in mind right there. So you can still use it. It'll just be on playback. So let's go ahead and get rid of this reverb right here, like so. And we're actually going to get rid of this compressor as well. All right, so let's go back to mode right here. And let's go ahead and add a plugin here again, another compressor. We'll do the LA2A again. This is one that gets me every now and then. So if I'm searching for LA2A, right? I come over here and then I grab this one right here. It's going to put that in there. And you'll see this little warning box comes up over here. And you'll see that it's grayed out right here. And we don't hear any compression. And that's because we chose the native version, this UADX version. This is the native version. And native plugins run on our computer, not on our audio interface. Only the UAD2 plugins run on our audio interface. So if you go to ARM mode, and your plugin gets grayed out like this, it's because it's the native version. So you just need to remove this and then put this UAD2 version on there. And again, we can crank this up and we get our compression back, right? So that is one thing that happens to me when I'm trying to move quickly. Sometimes I accidentally grab that native version of a plugin instead of the UAD2 version. Now, another thing to note, let's turn that arm back. And so, I can still hear my compression, but I got some latency and delay stuff going on in my headphones. All right, so let's take this plugin back off again. And let's say we want to dial in a sound. And so let's say one of my favorite plugins is if we come down here to the Lindell 80 channel right here. This is from Plugin Alliance. We add this on, and this is another Neve style kind of plugin. I really like it. We got some saturation going on. We can do a little EQ like this, very similar to that 1084 plugin. This is actually the plugin that got me sold on 1084 plugins. So anyways, and so, you know, maybe we really like this sound. This is really a great sound for us. But we need to go and track some vocals now, or maybe we need to punch something in. Well, when we go back to record, we no longer have any UAD2 plugins here. This is a third-party plugin, and even though maybe it sounds great right now, as soon as I switch to ARM, it's going to get disabled, just like that native plugin earlier. Because again, this third-party plugin, it runs on our computer. It does not run on the Apollo interface. So while we're tracking and we're in ARM mode, we're going to make sure we're using those UAD2 plugins. And again, because we're using the insert slot here, we can always swap those out later. So if we want to use a third-party compressor or another EQ or something like that, we can do that later. But while we're tracking, stick to UAD2. All right, so we got our LA2A compressor pulled back up and we're good to go. Now, one thing I almost forgot to mention is we have this tape extension on our vocal track. And when we're in ARM mode and we're recording and all that, the tape extension gets bypassed. So we don't hear it as an effect, and it does not get baked into our sound. The tape extension only comes into play, no pun intended, on playback. So if we undo ARM like this, and then you can see now that we're out of ARM, the needle's moving a little bit and stuff like that. And so now that tape saturation or effect would be on our track during playback, or obviously while we're just talking like this. But when we're in ARM mode, it is bypassed. But let's say while we're tracking, we want to add some reverb. Usually a lot of times when we're recording, doing vocals especially, reverb is nice to have, right? So as we did earlier, we can add this Pure Plate plugin here. So if we click on that and we choose Pure Plate, again, make sure we're choosing the Universal Audio UAD2 version. There we go. Now we have our reverb on here. Now I went ahead and made some adjustments to this because when you add a reverb plugin to a track like this, straight on like this, typically it's going to be in the fully wet reverb mode. And so it's actually going to sound a lot more like this. And this is not good to track with, right? So we have it brought down like this, and you can do this. This is perfectly fine. You can record like this, and that works great. However, what I like to do is I like to put my reverbs and my delays on buses. That way, if I'm recording more vocal tracks, backgrounds, harmonies, whatever, I can just reuse that same setting or that same bus track over and over. I don't have to keep adding these plugins to my channel every time I make a new vocal track. Or if I'm recording two things at once, maybe acoustic guitar and vocal at the same time, then I can set it up so I'm only using one plugin instead of two plugins, or two plugins instead of four plugins. So it saves on my DSP usage as well. So let's go ahead and remove this, just like so. And we're gonna set up a bus. So come over here, get rid of our search field right there, add, and we're going to choose bus right here. And we're just going to call this Vox Effects. I always do my buses in capitals. We're not worried about tape. Choose create. There we go. And then I like my vocal channels to be, my bus channels to be red. And then now let's put our plate reverb on here. So if we click that, we're going to choose pure plate just like before, grab the UAD2 version, stick that right there, and now it's up here. And even though it is in full wet mode right here, we're not using the mix knob at all. We don't even hear our reverb right now. And the reason for that is because we need to scroll down here, open up sends. We need to send audio from our vocal channel to our bus. So if we click on it here, you'll see the vocal effects bus is available. Choose that like so. And then here's our gain knob right here. And as we bring this up, you're going to hear reverb start to kick in, right? So now we got nice big reverb right there. That's probably a bit too much. I really like this setting right here, like around 1. Something like this works really well for how I like to record. So now I have reverb on here. And if I were to add another track using channel 2, maybe for acoustic guitar, I could send it to this same reverb. That way they're sharing the same DSP and reverb source. So that's really handy. And this is a really common technique when you're mixing and stuff too. You have like 1 or 2 reverbs and you send a bunch of stuff to that one reverb. That way they kind of all feel like they're in the same space and you're saving on resources as well. Now let's say I want to add a delay as well. Maybe I want some delay and reverb. Well, I could add a delay here in this same bus if I wanted to, but I could also just create another bus for my delay. So let's add it right after our vocal bus right here. Again, tracks, and we'll choose bus. We'll call it delay. And then I'm going to create this just like so. And now there's our delay bus right there. Again, I want to make this red just because, keeping things nice and organized. We'll come right here and we're going to choose a delay. We'll use the Galaxy Tape Echo and just drop that in there right there. And again, we cannot hear this because we need to send to this bus now. This is on a second bus. So we click our plus sign right there. Now we choose delay for this one. And as we add this in, you'll start to hear there's definitely some delay going on. If I mute the vocal effects with the reverb on it, now you can really hear that delay, right? And if I turn this one back on, there we go. So now I can add more reverb, more delay, whatever it is I want to do. And again, if I'm recording acoustic guitar at the same time on my second channel and I don't want delay on that one, I just want reverb, then I can just send that guitar to reverb and only have delay on my vocal. So lots of options here. Now, one thing I wanted to mention while we're here is that while we're in ARM mode and using our buses, we can only use up to 2 buses. That's all that's available to us, which is usually plenty for when we're just tracking. But just keep that in mind, we only have 2. And if we click on here, you'll see one of them is set to aux 1 and one of them is set to aux 2. And it doesn't matter which one's which. You can switch them if you want to, but they are set to one of those. If you have a third bus you want to use sometimes, then you can set that up and then you just want to choose turn ARM off on this one and then add ARM to that third one. And then you can swap back and forth as needed. But again, you can only have 2 on at any given time. We also have these buttons over here next to our sends. The M mutes our send from going to our buses. So if I turn both of those off like that, or dry vocal again, turn those back on just like so, and we can hear that going to the sends again. All right, so the next thing we want to talk about is this P button right here, and that stands for pre-fader or post-fader. When it's engaged and lit up, it is pre-fader. When it is not, it is post-fader. So by default, we are in post-fader mode right now. And what that means is that these sends right here that send the signal to our buses is post-fader. It's after our fader. So right here, this is our fader for our vocal. And so if I were to bring this down in volume, you're going to hear that the effects also come down in volume. So as I drag this down like so, and then as I bring it back up like this, you can hear those effects also come back in. And that's because, again, our signal is going through the fader, then to our sends. So as the signal from our fader decreases in volume, so does the signal going to our sends. We can also switch it to pre-fader now. And when we have it pre-fader, now these sends are sending the signal to our buses before it gets to this fader. So if I pull this fader down, these effect levels will not change. We'll still hear our delay and our reverb, but our dry signal will change. So as I pull this down like this, you can hear now it's just the effects, and it sounds kind of hollow and reverb and all that stuff. And as I bring this back in like this, now you can hear the dry signal in as well. Now, as far as when to use post-fader mode and pre-fader mode, it just really depends on how you like to work. I will say that while I'm recording my own vocals, I'm not using cue mixes or anything like that. I'm adjusting my levels in my headphones from these faders. So I will typically stay in post-fader mode, and that way if I need to bring up my vocal, my effects come up with it, or if I need to bring it down, my effects will go down with it as well. And because when you're in pre-fader mode, I can pull my dry signal down, but then I'd have to adjust the send levels from these gain knobs. And that's just more than I want to deal with. Now, when I'm mixing, I'm typically in pre-fader mode for a lot of things. And that's because a lot of times the balance, maybe say the drum kit that I'm sending to the reverb, I want that balance between the snares and the kicks and the overheads to be different than the balance I actually have on my faders with the dry signal. So that allows me some flexibility there. So just play around with it, try it out, see which you like to use when. All right, so a couple things to keep in mind as we get ready to actually hit record. Again, we're still in input monitoring. That's what's allowing us to hear our vocal currently. And there is also record enable. And we'll talk about the differences between those here in just a moment. Session-wise, I actually have a click right here, and we have drums. So I turn off the click track up here, and we definitely do not need the count in right there. So I rarely use the click, to be honest, personally. I find that even if I'm doing acoustic guitar and vocal only, that click tends to bleed really easily into microphone. So I'll use like a shaker sound or something like that that's a little less obtrusive. So right now, since we have drums and stuff, we don't need a click track to sing along with. And so we're going to actually just start at the very beginning of the track right here. Input monitor still on. We're going to make sure record enable is on, because that's going to allow us to record. If we hit the record button and this is not turned on, then it won't record. It'll basically essentially be the same as playing our song. So we're going to hit record real quick, and we're going to do a real fast take here. Here we go. Test 1 2, test 1 2, 1 2 test, 1 2 test, 1 2 test right there. It's been a while since I've seen the slow sunset mesas in New Mexico. I keep your picture taped to the dash, but it started to fade. I took a trip home to find myself. I boarded uptown in a cheap motel. I guess it's just as well, we've both seen our better days. Alright, so we're not going to win any Grammys anytime soon, right? But you get the idea. So now we have our vocal laid down right here. And if we turn this off like so, now I can't hear myself. But if I were to hit play back on my vocals right here, test 1 2, test 1 2, we can hear our vocals. That's actually pretty loud. we'll pull that back down just like so. So now we can hear our vocals, we can hear them on playback, all that kind of stuff. And now let's say I recorded this, and let's say I just totally botched this last little bit right here on this line. And we need to punch in right here and correct that. So what we want to do is we're going to click right here where we want it to start recording, right? And then we want to come up here to pre-roll and turn this on. And you'll see this little blue highlight right here. And what this does is when we hit record, it'll start playing our track from here. Once it gets here to where our line is currently, our cursor is right now, then it'll start recording at that point. So I just want to punch in just a hair before I want it to actually record. And then I like to actually have 2 bars of pre-roll. I want a little bit more than that. 1 is the default. So we'll double click in there. I'll hit 2 like that. And you can see now it's further back. Sometimes I do 3 or 4 just depending on how much I need to find where I'm at again. All right, so now this is where we're going to demonstrate the differences between record enable and input monitoring. So this whole entire time we've been input monitoring, and that's because with input monitoring, you can hear the sound coming through the vocal as long as your gain is turned up and all that stuff and everything's set correctly. You can hear your microphone all the time. We're stopped right now. You can hear it if I hit play. You can hear it if I hit record. You can hear the microphone and me talking the entire time. If I switch to record enable only like this, I can hear the microphone still right now. And while I'm recording, I can hear my microphone. However, if it's just playing, then this microphone gets muted until it starts recording. So how do I use these two? So input monitor, I have on most of the time. This allows me to hit play and to rehearse a section, to work out a part, all those kinds of things. I can always hear it. If I was in record enable only, then if I was trying to rehearse a part, I actually would not hear what's coming through this microphone. I would only be hearing what's recorded already. So whenever you're rehearsing something, working through a part, and generally just recording, I'm always an input monitor. However, whenever I want to punch in on a recording, like I'm going to do right now, I will be in record enable only. And that's because when I hit record right now, as I said before, it'll jump to this pre-roll location right here and it'll start playing. And then once it gets to where our cursor is right here, then the record will engage and it'll actually start recording at that point. So while this is playing, because we're in record enable, I can hear that previous vocal and I can sing along with it. I can get the same vibe. I can find, where I'm at and all that kind of stuff. And then once it gets here, it's ready to record. If I were in input monitoring or had input monitoring turned on, I could not hear the previous vocal. So let's go ahead and demonstrate that real quick. So let's turn input monitoring on and I'm going to hit record. And you'll notice we could not hear that previous vocal, right? So if I turn input monitoring off and we're in record enable only, now we'll hear that previous vocal. I can find where I'm at, I can match up the vibe, and I can track and fix this right here. Keep your picture taped to the dash, but it started to fade. And then I can sing it even more poorly than the first time. But you get the idea, right? So we could hear that vocal going forward. So that's really important to understand and know while you're tracking. It's super handy right there. One other thing I want to talk about, this is really particularly important while you're doing vocals, but it's get used a lot in other situations as well, and that's the idea of versions. So right now we are on version 1 of this track. That's the recording we took, right? We can actually add another version like this, and now it gives us a blank recording track right here. We can still get back to this first one, but now we have a new one. So we could record this whole entire thing again. We won't do that, but we'll just go right here and hit record. Fade. Right, that was terrible. And we can do another version right here of it. Fade. All right, so now we have these 3 versions here. So we could call this one, full take. You can name them. I can't type it all. And let's say really bad, right? And we'll call this one
not as bad, right? So now we have our 3 takes. We can make notes on each one of those. And then what we want to do is make a 4th version right here, and I call this one comp right here. And we're going to comp our vocals. This is really common to do. And basically what you do is you take the best parts of each version and you splice them all together into like the super take or the best take possible. Okay, so let's take this full version right here. And say again, we like a lot of it, but we were trying to fix just that one spot right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight right in here, ballpark, hit B to split that right there. And I'm going to come over here and do the same thing right there. And I'm going to click on this section. I want to use this section and keep this section. So we're going to Command C right there. Come up to our comp. I'm going to do Command V, and that's going to drop it right there. And then I'm going to come over here to this one, Command C to copy. Come up here, Command V, and now we have that. And we can fill in this gap right here. So version 2, our notes say it was really bad, so we're not going to use that. We're going to use this one. Let's say this one was not as bad and it was perfect actually. We just nailed it right here, right? So I'm going to copy this one, come up here to comp, and we're going to paste that in there. So now I have the best of this take, and then I have this best of this version 3 here, kind of fixing this. And from here, what we do is probably turn snap off, which it already is, and I can just fill in these gaps as I need to right here. So I can just drag this back if I want to. Looks like we got a little bit of an edit issue going on right here. So this probably needs to come over right here and, you know, something like that. And then it adds auto crossfades. You can extend your crossfades if needed, if you hear any pops or weird clicks. And you can always just adjust this a little bit as well to get in a nice spot where you don't hear clicks and pops on your tracks. All right, so now I zoomed out a little bit so we can see a bit better. We're going to turn pre-roll off right here. And now if we listen back to the dash, but it started to fade. Not the cleanest edit, but we could, you know, dial it in if we wanted to, but you get the idea, right? So comping is really handy for getting the best take possible. In Luna, it's not as easy and quick as other recording softwares like Logic and Studio One. They do it really well. Hopefully that'll be an update at some point, just some better comping options. But it is doable, it is possible, and that's how I like to comp within Luna. I have my versions, and I have a comp version right here, and then I just pull the best parts of each version into my comp version.
All right, so that was a whole lot going over recording vocals in Luna. Again, I've left chapter markers down below for you to reference. If you have any questions still or think I missed something, let me know in the comments down below. Other than that, thank you so much for watching, and YouTube thinks you would like to watch one of these videos.